Alright, so two reviews in a week. That's not like me at all. So, this is a two for the price of one review. I thought, a couple of new albums have come out this week besides the Pain of Salvation album that I just reviewed on Thursday. And I wanted to sort of go over a couple of these records a little bit more briefly. First off, I'm going to be talking about John Petrucci's new solo album, Terminal Velocity. So, yeah, we've been waiting 15 years for a new John Petrucci solo album, and 10 years for John Petrucci and Mike Portnoy to play together again, and, well, all I have to say about this record... Yes! Yes! Yeah! Yes! Yes! That pretty much sums up the album. Okay, to bring things back down to reality just a little bit, it is a very fantastic instrumental shred record. It's exactly the kind of record that we would want John Petrucci to put out in 2020. Very upbeat, triumphant sounding rock riffage, some of his most fluid and soulful playing that we've heard on a record in a while. I actually quite like this record a lot better than Distance Over Time. Maybe this will get our hopes up for a new Liquid Tension Experiment release in the future now that John and Mike are working together once again. We'll just have to see where that goes from there. As for particular tracks that I really enjoyed, of course there's the title track, which has been out for a little bit now, and it's a really good, instrumental shred track. The thing is, you can't really say too much about these instrumental shred tracks because there is sort of a formula to them. You have your basic melody and then a few minutes of soloing. All the tracks are basically like this, but they're done so well. I mean, when we have guys like Pliny and C2A all coming out and doing the same basic kind of thing now, every once in a while, John Petrucci needs to come out, put out a solo album to school these people, and he did so quite effectively on this record. Another track from the record that's kind of a bit of a standout is Out of the Blue, which is sort of a Gary Moore-style blues rock tune. I did find it kind of broke the album's flow a little bit, but taken on its own, it's a fantastic track. Another one that I really enjoyed was Gemini, which is a track that's been sort of in the underground John Petrucci circles for years now. He'd been playing it at clinics since the 90s, and this is the first time that it's seen an official album release. Alright, so now we move on to the second album that I'm going to be looking at in today's review, and that's Metallica's S&M 2. Now, it's hard to overstate just how important Metallica's S&M album back in 1999 was. It was basically the first real attempt for a heavy metal band to work with a symphony orchestra in a way that really sort of stuck out in the mainstream. It's not like they were the first rock band to work with an orchestra. Many bands had done it in the studio before. A couple had even done it live, Deep Purple in 1969 being probably one of the first examples in heavy metal. But all of those kind of performances had either been seen as ways to cheese up a power ballad in the studio, or very niche performances for live albums and live performances. S&M was really the first combination of a heavy metal band and a symphony orchestra that really became a big hit. And it seems like there have been a million copycats of that ever since. So, having them sort of go back and do this, they performed it last year as a sort of 20th anniversary thing to the original S&M. Was a really good idea on paper, and there are some moments where the execution of it is fantastic, particularly whenever they take on any newer material that had been released since the previous S&M album, including a rendition of a song from Saint Anger, All Within My Hands, that's eerily elegant. Not something you would typically associate with material from Saint Anger, but they did a very interesting arrangement of it. As well, there's tracks like The Unforgiven Part 3, where James Hetfield is singing solely backed by the orchestra, no interruption from the band whatsoever. But the album does have its flaws. There are a few things that really bug me about this record, like the fact that a lot of the material is just taken verbatim from the first S&M. Many of the songs that are from their older periods are just rehashed straight from it. Even the orchestral arrangements are exactly identical. They could have done a little bit more, I think. Maybe bring in some older music from, like different older music. Can you imagine an orchestral rendition of something like Welcome Home Sanitarium, Ride the Lightning, To Live Is to Die? There's a lot of potential for really epic renditions of some of their older tracks, and the only thing they really did along those lines was have the principal double bassist of the orchestra, the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra once again, do sort of a tribute to Cliff Burton performing Anesthesia Pulling Teeth on his double bass, with Lars Ulrich playing drums along with it. That's about the only sort of interesting new arrangement of an older piece, whereas the rest of the older pieces are just cut straight from the original S&M. And I do feel like that's a bit of a lost opportunity. They could have even focused more on new material. Maybe throw in one or two more tracks from Saint Anger and Death Magnetic. It does seem a little disappointing. There's a lot of good stuff going on the record, but I feel like there was a bit of missed potential for something more gripping and more interesting. As well, they have a couple of moments where the orchestra takes on a couple of classical pieces on their own, both Russian composers, Mosolov and Prokofiev. And while I'm personally a big fan of Russian classical music, a lot of Metallica fans are probably going to just skip these tracks, maybe find them a little tedious to sit through, and I think that's a little sad, but at the same time, I can understand why some fans might not enjoy this aspect of the album any more than the lack of newer material. So, yeah, it's a good record overall, but it is a little flawed. So yeah, there you have it. That's two more albums that came out this weekend that I just wanted to sort of briefly touch upon. And if I have to give them a score, John Petrucci's Terminal Velocity, 9.5 out of 10. It's almost perfect. I mean, I think the only thing I would change is I would probably have put Out of the Blue somewhere else in the track listing, because it does sort of break the flow of the record a little. Maybe put it at the end as sort of a, end credits kind of piece to lead you out into the cold and frosty night after the album's finished. As for S&M Part 2, I'd say it's a decent 6.5 or 7 out of 10. It's decent. There's obviously the material is well played. The new material is arranged very interestingly, but there's just sort of a flaw in how they executed it. There's just not enough new stuff. There's not enough gripping new engagement from the band. It's just them sort of rehashing S&M Part 1 and throwing in a couple of little extras for the more recent fans. They could have done a lot more with it than they did, but I'm glad that they put it out anyway. So anyway, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll be doing more of these.